Hello and welcome to Special People, Extraordinary Times. We all know that the people who served in our armed forces were all special people who all lived through extraordinary times. And we're here to explore that now with Paul Ray. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Elaine. How are you? Thank you.
I'm good. And I know that you were in the U.S. Navy.
I was.
For how long?
19 years.
19 years.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you came in for the war in Iraq
Correct.
and the war in Afghanistan.
The war on terror, sure.
And the interesting thing is that you were around during 9/11
Yes, I was.
in 2002,
2001.
2001.
Yep, sure was.
And what did you do?
My ship was actually not deployed at the time. We were in our home port of Pascagoula, Mississippi. And like everybody else, we heard almost immediately that morning, glued to the TVs. And then we heard through official channels. And the official channels, of course, told us that we would be underway first thing the next morning, which was not the norm to get a ship underway on short notice like that. And that we would be taking station in the Gulf off the coast of Houston to defend that city against any aircraft that might be trying to make an approach on the U.S.
So that's what the Navy did, right? They sent ships to guard coastal areas?
Right. They used the Aegis-class cruisers, which are the best air defense ships in our Navy, and they stationed them off of all of the major cities on each of the coasts in order to be able to track any inbound aircraft and give everybody plenty of notice.
So how far apart were they that they could actually guard an entire community?
The primary sensors on a ship like that has about a 500-mile range, so they were stationing the ships about every 250 miles so that the sensors would overlap so that you'd have redundancy and the ability to track anything that was coming.
The ship that you were in a number of different ships over the years.
I was, about 8.
But the ship that was guarding Houston right after 9/11 was what?
That was the USS Yorktown, named after the battlefield in Virginia. It's a cruiser. CG-48 is the hull number of the Yorktown.
And it holds how many men?
About 350.
That's a lot of men to be in close quarters.
It's a good-sized ship by Navy standards. I was also on a couple of frigates, and everything on a frigate is far more compact than it is on a cruiser. You consider yourself lucky if you're on a cruiser because you got a lot more space.
Yeah, and so how long were you guarding Houston?
We went underway the morning of the 12th, and we were on station for about 10 days. At that point, the other ships had to rotate off station, and the Navy started shuffling the ships around. At that point, we moved over closer to Miami as they took the ship that had been in that station back in for reprovisioning. We did Miami for about 3 or 4 more days until that ship could get back on station, and then we went back to our home port for a couple of days, got restocked up, and then went back out, back on the Houston station.
So I'm glad to know you were guarding Miami. That makes me feel comfortable.
Yeah, by about a week after.
Even though we were very lucky and New York was the only one hit, the only city hit.
It was an odd time to be at sea. Those ships are so robust and are able to track so many aircraft. We're usually tracking hundreds of commercial aircraft at any point in time if you're anywhere near the coast. And to have the skies as vacant as they were for that week
because
period.
They were banned. There was no air traffic going on after 9/11, right?
Correct. Commercial air was shut down for several days. As I stated, we were serving in the Gulf of Mexico, and there was a very critical need to get supplies back out to the oil fields in the Gulf. So the first aircraft that were actually granted authorization to fly again were not commercial airliners. They were the little helicopters that supply and get people on and off of the platforms in the Gulf. And at that point in time, they had to establish brand new protocols for how they were going to identify these helicopters that usually had free run of the Gulf.
Sure.
In order to make sure that they were doing something that had been approved by the FAA and everything.
And that was the most exciting time for you in the Navy?
I would probably say so. I did 2 deployments to the Persian Gulf, and the ships I was on for those deployments helped enforce the UN sanctions about the oil embargoes and things like that in the Gulf, and they were tenser deployments.
Sure.
And there were times when you did missile shoots and things like that. Those were more exciting on a limited basis. But as far as a sustained, high op tempo kind of thing, I would say right after 9/11.
Well, and it happened so quickly.
Right.
You know, you had to be prepared to get out and do what you had to do right away, because it all happened, nobody knew that it was going to happen.
For sure. Most of the other deployments, you had months and months of preparation and training with the battle groups beforehand, and the schedule was known for maybe a year in advance. 9/11 was the exact opposite of that, and it really made the Navy do what we'd all trained to do.
Luck, hopefully, we'll never have to go through that again.
I couldn't agree with you more.
So, Paul, thank you very much for allowing us this look into your career. Actually, you're our first veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan. It's very important to keep these stories alive and in history, and so that people know and can appreciate the men and women that have served this country so well in any kind of insurrection.
Well, thank you for doing your part to get the message out.
Well, it's important.
I agree.
For OCTV, I'm Elaine Kugelman, and thank you for joining Paul Ray and I in this talk about his service for this show, Special People, Extraordinary Times. Thank you.